Okay, we're live, allegedly. Um, got two feeds here to make sure that I don't miss any comments, because last time I did a live video, the comments were pretty delayed. So it definitely looks like there's a little bit of a delay because I'm not seeing my video going, but it says I'm live. So hopefully this is going through. Maybe it'll be going through in like 15 seconds. So yeah, anyway, I'll get started. Okay. All right, cool. So there's a little bit of a delay. All right. So we got a few people here already. That's awesome. I got my coffee here. I know at least two people have told me that they would be drinking coffee. So if anybody wants to say what coffee they're drinking, that'd be cool. I drink Pete's myself. I've got a Keurig. So yeah, I'm a big coffee guy. So all right, cool. So Feral Human is here. I know you're one of the people that said you were going to be drinking coffee. So all right. So I figured I would just start off by doing a really quick brief on the last couple months while people put together questions, if there are questions. And then I'll address the questions if there are any. Oh, hey. All right. Michelle's, I'm in bed, don't have coffee yet. So that's always a good spot to be, though. It's easier to go without coffee when you're still in bed. I still look like I'm asleep myself. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I hope my East Coast and international people appreciate my early start here, because that's kind of why I did it. I wanted to make it possible for more people to tap into this video. So cool. That's really cool. All right. So anyway, yeah. So for some people that already know what's been going on, bear with me. I'll try not to be too repetitive, but basically what happened was in March, I got deployed to Oakland, California, and I was assisting FEMA in a huge mass vaccination site for COVID. I believe it actually was the first one. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know it was definitely one of the first mass vaccination sites. It was already up and running when I got there. And then, so yeah, so I did that for about 2 months, and I was working primarily I was working in the walk-in area for vaccinations. And we would cycle between, I think it was like 4 or 5 different stations that, yeah. So we would kind of rotate. So it was nice that every day we were doing something different. So it kind of helped to delay the monotony sort of. And, yeah, so that was, again, I won't get into too much detail on what I was doing there. I've done videos on it. And then again, if a question comes up, I'll get into more detail. And then we also split our time between the parking lot, the people that actually would drive up to get their vaccinations, and we would be walking the parking lot, just observing people after they got their shot, making sure that everybody was doing okay. Definitely have a lot of stories. Probably the bulk of my stories for Oakland, at least, would take place in the parking lot, just because you'd interact with so many more people. I mean, we got, typically it'd be like 5,000 to 8,000 people a day at the site. And usually we'd have maybe 400 to 600 on a good day in the walk-in area. So that kind of gives you an idea of the proportion of people that we would have in the parking lot specifically. And so for that reason, the bulk of our stories would come from there. Also, I do know that the last time I did a live feed out here, the internet got a little bit spotty. So if the feed knocks off, please stay with me. I have my phone here is my backup that I can always get on. So I will get back on very quickly, as obviously my phone is not my ideal avenue, but if it gets to that point, I'll do that. So anyway, so yeah, we did Oakland through April, and at the end of April, FEMA decided to fire us because they basically were winding everything down, and they wanted to cut the staff down basically. So we still it's a lot more than I thought. Yeah. So they still needed to run the walk-in, but they wanted to be more conservative with the money, so they got rid of us, and then they re-shipped us, or some of us anyway, up to Medford, Oregon for the second half. So from the end of April until basically last week, I've been in Medford, Oregon. So completely different experience, totally different. And so the interesting thing was it very, very smaller scale, but very, very much the same operation itself, just a much, much smaller scale. We in Medford, that number, that 5,000 to 8,000 number was about three to 500, I'd say, and even that was like, again, that's kind of like a good day. So it could get less than that. We ended up vaccinating over 26,000, just over 26,000 people in Medford over the course of 2 months. So in Oakland, you'd get that in 3 to 4 days typically. But you know, it's still significant in that Oakland, or that Oregon was and is just one of the worst, absolute worst states in the country for everything COVID. You know, they don't take it seriously. They just don't. They don't want to wear masks. They don't want to get vaccinated. They want to go out in public, and they get together and they put pressure on the governor there to basically open everything up. And the numbers kind of show that. And we typically would hit like 3% capacity on a daily basis in terms of like what our abilities were to vaccinate people and how many people actually showed up. So, you know, you can kind of spin that two ways. I mean, you can look at that in the pessimistic way of like, wow, we really didn't do nearly as much as we could have or that we wanted to do. But then on the other hand, you think, well, these people were so anti getting the vax that maybe they wouldn't have gotten it at all if we hadn't come into their community. And, you know, 26,000 is still 26,000 people. And you kind of extrapolate the effect that can have, you know, that's one more person that didn't spread COVID to another person who maybe was around somebody who was immunocompromised and who would have died, maybe, you know, you sort of that kind of thing. So you have to kind of think of it in those terms. And that to me, that's a really important way to look at it, because you kind of throw statistics and numbers out the window at a certain point when you're working with it, when you're working directly with people like that, and you kind of see the humanity behind it. So anyway, I see we've got a couple of questions now, so I'll start addressing those. The other thing I was going to say about Oregon was that while it was a small scale version of pretty much the same mission, our job was entirely different. We were kind of working where in Oakland, we were actually working operationally in the work itself, everything besides giving the vaccinations. I didn't give any vaccines, but all right, got multiple lines of communication here. So anyway, sorry. So in Oregon, I was doing a much smaller scale version of the job, and we were doing a different job completely. But I will get into more of the details of that if a question addresses it. So let's see. Let me get to the first question here. All right, I like this little feature that I can do this where I can highlight questions like this. So, all right, I'm interested in anyone that you saw that had any of the allergic reactions to the vaccines. what were the reactions and how did you treat them? All right, so this is a really good question. And in fact, it was kind of in my head, I was going through things that I could answer if nobody comes and asks the questions. What are the questions that I would answer? This is one of the questions that I would have answered. So the allergic reactions from the vaccine, definitely there were a good amount. Again, you take that with a grain of salt, and that we had a lot of people. I mean, especially in Oakland. So if you're getting 5,000 to 8,000 people, you're going to get some reactions. With Oakland, I definitely dealt with them much more directly because we were involved in the job, the operational job itself. So that was a part of our job description. So the first vaccines we did were Pfizer, and then at some point about halfway through, we switched to Johnson and Johnson. I don't believe we ever actually did Moderna in Oakland, but we did. So we did Pfizer, and then we did Johnson and Johnson. And Johnson and Johnson, I will say, there seemed to be a lot more reaction to the Johnson and Johnson than there was to Pfizer, interestingly enough. And it sounded like, from what I was hearing in the news, that may have been kind of true across the board. Yeah, the general, like the most common reaction, I think would be just some sort of element of like stress and anxiety that would be, and I really do believe that to a certain extent, the observation setup that we had might have like contributed to it, because we would have them go into an observation room for 15 minutes after they got their shot, and then it's they're all sitting in this socially distanced table with like all these military personnel, and we've got like EMS outside and at the ready. And it's like, if you're kind of an anxious person anyway, and you're like thinking like, oh, what could be wrong with me? And then, we've got like signs posted with, oh, these are the symptoms you might face. So there may have been an element of like people getting in their own heads a little bit and just feeling really anxious. There were people fainting occasionally. Nothing really, so anyway, to answer the question, how we treated them, how we handled them would be just radioing the emergency medical staff that was always pretty close by. So actually, if we were working in the walk-in area, it was easier because we had exclusivity. It was the only spot for people to go. In the parking lot, I think there was like 12 or 15 lanes of traffic that were just full of cars at all times. So we had people like manning each lane, and so you've got traffic to work with. So the ambulance would have to like work their way through the lane. So it would tend to take a little longer. So sometimes there was sort of the illusion that it was more, I don't want to say illusion, but more urgent than in the walk-in, just because it was like a bigger ordeal. The ambulance had to come in, and there's people all over the place, and other people are seeing it. And then it's like, oh, or somebody else who's anxious sees the ambulance, and then did that make them, think they were having a reaction? But anyway, so generally, you'd call for EMS, and then you would just stay with them until they arrived. It was one of those things where, like, in my head, it seemed kind of stressful. We would, if possible, when we were in the parking lot, if they were having a medical ordeal and they were able to drive, we would ask them to come out. We'd open the cone up, have them drive into the emergency lane that we had set up, and get them out of the middle of where everybody was. But if that wasn't possible, we would just keep them there, and you'd put a cone on top of their car, so it would be easy to identify them. But it never was really that stressful or bad to handle it. It's, you always knew that help was close by. And again, the vast majority of the reactions were some kind of, to me anyway, seemed like it was a sort of anxiety situation. There seemed to be more physical reactions happening with Johnson and Johnson. I know that there were people having like either seizure type events or, and again, I didn't see all these personally. Some of it was just hearing it on the radio, but more, and again, I'm not like a medical professional, so I don't know the details of what happened with some of them. I know personally, like the one that I saw that seemed to be the worst, this was Johnson and Johnson, was a guy, he pulled up. I think his wife was the one driving. He was in the passenger seat, and she honked for help. And when I got there, he looked like he was just feeling faint, and then actually shaking, like he was convulsing. And I said to the guy I was with, who had just called EMS on the radio, I was like, "Hey, tell him like ASAP, like really be quick," because sometimes, again, there's a lot of people. Sometimes EMS would kind of have to prioritize who they responded to. And I thought he was having a seizure. So that's what it looked like to me. It turned out that he was actually just in the process of fainting, and for whatever reason, that's how he looked. But it looked kind of scary to me. They ended up giving them water. They checked on them. They kind of stayed with them for a little bit, and then we had them actually just stay. They were parked right at our station, and they ended up staying for like over an hour. We told them like don't feel any rush to go. They actually ended up calling EMS again, or we called EMS. I don't remember if he fainted again, but I know he was going through an ordeal again with the shaking kind of thing. They ended up coming back out. So anyway, that was probably the biggest one of the reactions that I personally saw. I also thought it was interesting that the J&J seemed to create more reactions like that. The whole idea that there was like an anxiety portion of it. The thing is, people waited to do the J&J because it was only a one-shot ordeal, whereas Pfizer you had to do two. So it kind of would, in a logical sense, kind of made sense to me that you might hold off on doing the shots because you have an anxiety thing with needles. So you wait to do the one that only has the one shot. And then because of that, you are in a pool of people who are tending to be a little bit more afraid of needles. And then that's why you have more reactions. I don't have any scientific basis to back that up. That's just based on my observation, but it kind of makes sense to me. So, all right, I'm going to do one more here. All right. So what was your favorite activity that you did either place and why? So definitely for that kind of stuff, recreational wise, Medford was better. And really that was probably the only way that Medford was better. I wasn't a huge fan of the switch. I kind of was a little bit feeling depressed at some points about leaving Oakland, but Medford had a lot of really cool hiking spots, and that was probably the coolest part. I did Upper Table Rock, Lower Table Rock. I'm trying to think. So probably Pilot Rock was a place about 45 minutes south of Medford, and they had this gigantic rock on the top of that was, when I looked at it, I was like, there's no way I'm climbing that. But all the other, the over 40s didn't climb it. But all the under 40s did. I'm slightly on the under 40 side still. So I was like, all right, I'll go for it. So I ended up climbing the thing, and it was pretty crazy. I don't have any pictures at the ready, but I had a couple cool pictures of the climb up and the actual getting to the top. If I do another one of these and people ask to see them, I'll try to come prepared and put them up next time. So that was probably my favorite part of it. Let's see here. I've got an older aunt that I hope I can convince to get the vaccine. She stays in the house, which might be okay. All right, yeah. So, and that's part of why I was wanting to do this was that there might be people who are still feeling apprehensive about the vaccine. And even though this isn't technically a question, I would kind of like to address that, just that feeling. Like I can relate on a personal level to the anxieties, not necessarily of getting, like, I don't have an issue with getting shots, but I am severely afraid and I get anxious about doing blood draws. Like, I'll faint if I don't lie back. Just being honest there, I'm terrified of it. And I can kind of channel that fear to sort of understand what it's like for people who don't want to get shot. So the best thing I can say for that is I just relate to people. I just say, you know, I know how that feels, and I got the 2 shots. I can speak to my experience. I definitely had a very sore arm with the first shot, and, you know, mild fatigue, but nothing too crazy. And then when I got the second shot, I had I had body aches everywhere, but you know, and again, a little bit of fatigue, and I definitely was feeling chills the next day, and it was like a mild cold. So it's definitely it will give reactions to people, and it's a numbers game. I mean, like I always say, you get it's like any vaccine. There's always risk of side effects, but the one commonality that I see with all the vaccines, with all the COVID vaccines and COVID itself, the risk of COVID is far, far worse than the vaccine itself. And any of the side effects that you see for the vaccine, you can see for COVID. And usually, like in a vacuum, you know, all things being equal, your reaction to the shot itself is going to be worse than, or I mean, your reaction to COVID itself is going to be worse than getting the shot. Let me see. I saw there was a couple other questions here. Let's see. All right. So Christopher Williams said, I think the technology is a little bit different in Johnson & Johnson. I think it's similar to AstraZeneca. Yeah, that's true. It is and I'm not a scientific person, but I know on a very layman's terms level that it's much more like a traditional vaccine, whereas Moderna and Pfizer have more of a, like, people had this thing about it changing your DNA, which it doesn't, but you hear the word DNA and people have that feeling like maybe that's part of where that whole idea that there was a chip involved. I'm not sure, but yeah, it definitely was a different type of vaccine, which I think for some people that's why they preferred it, but then maybe that was also why there were more reactions. So I can't see them draw the blood. I don't give blood because of that. Yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. It's them doing it that I can't handle it. I have to like look away and be like laid back. Otherwise I'll just conk out. I took 2 ibuprofen before getting both doses and only had arm pain. That's a good, yeah. So that's smart, like preemptively. Yeah. So arm pain was definitely the worst part for me. It was actually for the first shot, the arm pain was worse. It lingered for like 3 days and I couldn't sleep on that side. And the second one, it was more my whole body hurt. But it didn't feel like it lasted as long. It was like a 24 hours and it was a done deal. And maybe because my body hurt everywhere, I didn't notice it so much in the arm specifically. But also, you know, your arms may be more used to it the second time. All right. So what vaccine did you get? I got Moderna, and second dose knocked me out for the day, but so grateful for the vaccine. So yeah, so I got Pfizer, but a friend of mine, one of the guys that I work with, actually got the Moderna, and he said the same thing. He said it like just kicked his ass. He was out for like 2 days, just like bedridden with the flu. So I guess I'm kind of glad I got Pfizer because it sounded like Pfizer was generally not as much of a ass-kicking event. Yeah, second dose knocked me out for the day, but grateful. Yeah, so that's kind of yeah. I definitely anecdotally can agree with that one. I got the Pfizer and my arm was a little sore for the second and no side effects. Nice. Yeah, that was generally again, anecdotally, that was what I saw from the people that I worked with, because we all got our vaccines too. We all got the people that I worked directly with. We all got the Pfizer actually about 2 or not even like 10 days before we deployed, and then got the second dose about 2 weeks into it. And it was generally the same consensus, was that it was either made you kind of sick the next day, didn't react at all, or gave you the sore arm. And Moderna seemed to affect people worse. And then J&J, none of the people that I knew personally got J&J, but the people that got J&J, like the customers or the patients that came there, seemed to have worse reactions as well. Let me take another sip here. To show my mugs. I'm a very themed guy, as you might be able to tell. All right. Let's see. 6:30 here. Okay, so I don't think I see any more questions. Oh, I missed one. Okay, here we go. Good thing I went back to look. All right, so we got another question here. So did you ever end up throwing out any vaccine that wasn't used? Yes, unfortunately, yes. Not me personally, as I didn't handle the vaccines at all, but that definitely happened, unfortunately, a lot, or at least a lot more than you would hope, which you would hope never. It seemed like it got better as time went on. In Oakland was especially tricky because of just the sheer numbers. I mean, with so many people, it just became a matter of timing, because you don't want to turn anybody away, and you also don't want to waste any shots. But once you mix them, and once the chemists did their thing and produced the shot, like, you had a certain amount of time to use it, and then it was dead, and you couldn't unmix it. It was, once you did it, clock started. So what would happen to kind of circumvent that in Oakland, especially, again, because of the sheer numbers of people, they would just slow everything down. It became a case by case situation where, so everybody would come in the tents. There was 3 tents set up, and each tent could fit probably 20 cars. So they had, and each tent would branch off into separate lanes. And they would just hold them. Like, they would take a count, and then they'd be like, okay, we need this many shots. And then the chemist would produce that many shots, and then they would bring them. And so because of that, the last groups of people tended to take a lot longer. And then again, like Disneyland, once you're in line, you're going to get your shot. So the gates close at 7, but the line could extend. I mean, from the gate to the tent it was long. I don't know if you've seen like pictures of the site. I mean, it looked like a Disneyland parking lot. I mean, it was amazing. It was like a maze that went through the whole Coliseum parking lot. So it could be a while after 7 before you went. So that's why, like, if you were working the parking lot, you would rather be part of the morning shift than the night shift, because you wouldn't know when you were going to be done. But yeah, so that was how we kind of circumvented that. And then in the walk-in area, it was a bit easier, just because it was a smaller amount. So they would have like, they had FEMA Corps people set up at the top of the hill for people that got off the BART. Typically, most of the people that did the walk-in were coming off the BART, which is like the train system in the area. It's sort of like a subway. They would come off there, and then we had people who were notifying on the radio to the check-in, hey, you got 2 people are coming to get their shot, or 1 person, or 4 people, whatever. And then they would keep note of that, and they would let the people know, the chemists know, that we need this many. And then again, it was the same thing, like case by case basis. So we got a lot better at it. And Medford was even better in terms of waste. I think it's just one of those. It's like inversely related to how many people. So Medford was a pretty small scale, so I think it was easier to not have waste. And I actually worked not in the pharmacy, but I worked a lot closer to it than I did in Oakland, so I got to see more of like what that process was like. I actually did the running a few times where I would actually hold the big carton. There's a big like cooler of vaccines and bring them over, and basically again, yeah, it was just they would account for exactly how many doses they needed. So it became a lot better near the end, but it definitely was a problem at the beginning. Let's see if there was any other older ones that I missed here. Allergic reactions, activity you did. Right. Draw the blood. Okay, which vaccine did you get? All right, let's see. All right, I've been fully vaccinated since late April. Life has been back to normal. I don't wear a mask, something conservatives want. My chance of getting it and spreading it is low, so I don't wear a mask. Okay, yeah, No, don't apologize. I'm glad. I appreciate it. I like the interactions. Yeah, so this is an interesting. I was actually just talking about this yesterday. So here in California, Gavin Newsom, our governor, basically he's like, okay, if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. And the problem we're running into is that people are just. I believe that people are just gonna lie and say like I got vaccinated and then not wear the mask. And I think there's a logic behind that kind of makes sense to me. I mean, if you're a type of person that you don't believe in getting the shot, you don't believe in wearing a mask, like you think it's stupid, and then now all of a sudden you're given the option to not wear a mask and you're not going to get checked on if you actually got the shot, it would just make sense to me that you would just be like, well, yeah, I got the shot and I'm not wearing a mask. Obviously that's not true across the board, but anecdotally, I can speak to that in Oregon, in Medford, that seemed to be like that, because just going off of the fact that we only had like 3% showing up for shots every day, and yet every single person besides like myself and the people that I worked with in that hotel didn't wear a mask. Like nobody besides the staff, none of the customers or the people staying there wore a mask. And I'm like, there's got to be people that aren't vaccinated, because clearly 100% of people aren't getting vaccinated in this town. And also it's interesting because I just think that it should be either like everybody keeps wearing the mask, or don't wear a mask unless you think that you're at risk. I don't know. It's because it just leaves it up to interpretation or like your own personal feelings of it. And if that's the case, then just make it optional across the board. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I agree that I've definitely been in situations where I wouldn't wear the mask. And then like in Oregon, for example, I went for probably like the first 3 weeks when they said you don't have to wear a mask if you're vaccinated. I still wore a mask all the time because I was just used to it. I had to wear it all the time at work. But like I said, nobody wore a mask. And then the one time I actually took my mask off to go downstairs and do my laundry, I ran into like 3 people, both on the way down and up, who were wearing masks. Like just that one time, it was crazy. It's like, okay, now the one time that I decide not to wear a mask, and I don't want to be, it's kind of it's like a communal thing for me. And it's like a courtesy thing. Like if I'm around people that are all wearing masks, I'll wear one. And if I'm around a lot of people who aren't, I might not, especially if I know if they're vaccinated or not. Because again, like you said, Chris, my chances of getting it and spreading it are low. So I'm not really worried for myself. It's more, for other people. I don't mind wearing one. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I was against the CDC making that rule. Yeah, I agree. That's a very good point. I felt like that was a mistake, and that really screwed things up. Again, in Oregon in particular, because of just people would take any reason they could. I mean, you couldn't get these people to abide by mask mandates when you had them, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, don't worry about it. And yeah, it was bad. Like the governor there really, she just did it because of political pressure. People were protesting her. She went like 3 days with the full lockdown and then just lifted it because people were angry. People actually came to our site because she came to our site, and people came to protest. And yeah, that was just unfortunate. But yeah, I do think that the CDC kind of screwed things up by making that announcement. All right. Yeah, I think that was a huge mistake by the CDC. All right, another question here. Did you see anyone with the new Delta variant, or were you unaware of this variant causing any difference? So I really only found out about the Delta variant near the very end of my tour there. So I didn't personally see anybody that I knew of with it. But I became more aware of it at the end. I actually talked about it in like the last podcast I did about just in terms of its prevalence in the UK. But yeah, I didn't know about it really until I was done. But that's definitely of a concern because from what I understand, if you're fully vaccinated, you're pretty much protected at the same rate against the Delta variant as you are against COVID itself. But if you're not, even if you only have one vaccine, you are not fully protected. So the thing we're kind of worried about, and this is what happened in the UK, is because the UK has a similar history with the US in terms of like their dips, their highs and lows, and with COVID, there's a fear that we could follow in their footsteps and have a, I don't know, fourth wave now of cases. So let's see here. I stay about this Delta. I get sick after I use my homemade vaccine. I can't answer that one, man. I'm not going to even go there. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, I heard that about the Delta. So let's see. I don't think there's any more ones. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Don't put me on record on that one. Let's see. Oh, this variant causing any difference? I'm glad the U.S. is now donating vaccines. Definitely. Okay. Don't think I missed any. It's low. Let's see here. It's gonna draw the blood. Different. All right. Yeah. So if I miss anybody's questions, feel free to just throw them out there again. I'm gonna take another sip of my Jack Skellington coffee here. Oh yeah, there was some. So I remember my last episode I did like just podcast, like no video. And I know I got a comment from somebody that they're not a big fan of podcasts. Yeah, the editing was brought up. Like the thing so when I do the podcast, the nice thing about doing audio only is that I can edit out the pauses and the ums and the likes and make it come out much more seamless. But then, of course, that does take a lot longer to do. And I think that's something I need to just work on in general, just being more clear. Like here, I give myself a little bit of a pass because this is live and I intended this to be kind of interactive. But when I finish with this, I am going to put it on the podcast channel too, and I will edit it down. So this is kind of like a trial for me, I would say. I wanted to see, for one, like if I did it super early, what kind of response would I get, and would it help like to get more of a response from people more, to the east of where I am over here on the West Coast. And then I'm trying to figure out, like, as I've gotten back from my tour and everything, what sort of formula I'm going to go with going forward. I was toying with the idea of, just like I said before, just going back to just purely doing the podcast and then just uploading the audio with this background I have here. But I do think that it's kind of cool having the sort of like visual as well. Maybe there's some kind of middle ground there. It's definitely easier to just do audio and then upload that, but then it's also kind of cool doing the video. Could I maybe think about maybe doing like a weekly, like I used to do a weekly wrap. I did that for a little while. That was kind of cool, as long as I have interaction. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Let me know. I definitely wouldn't be against doing like a weekly thing like I'm doing now. It's kind of cool just for the sort of catching up, though. Like the weekly thing could just be more just general, this kind of stuff, whereas like the regular episodes would be more targeted materials. I think I got another question here. Let's see. Does anyone else think it's beyond weird that we're having the Delta show up right when we're not having to wear masks now, and that Delta variant is much more easily transmitted? Doing the Kermit, it's like that Kermit meme. I always joke about that. I'm like, dude, I don't know if you've seen that meme where he's like, it's none of my business, and he's taking a sip. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's beyond weird that we're having the Delta show up right when we're not having to wear masks now, and it's much more easy. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not done any heavy research on the matter other than just what I mentioned about the numbers and the UK comparisons. Makes sense to me. I mean, it happened last year. Last summer, the same thing. And that was even worse last year because we had no vaccine, and we had vaccine wasn't anywhere in sight. But I remember around June or somewhere, about a year ago, we just like relaxed everything here, at least here in California. And the rationale was like, well, we've been doing really well. Our numbers have gone way. It was like, if you have, I think it was like 3 weeks of declining cases, they would lift it. And I just thought that was so stupid. Like personally, the logic on that makes no sense, because the thing is, like, that's the reason why it got better, because you were implementing mask mandates, and because you were socially distancing, and because you were shutting down dine-in. Like, that's why it got better, and that's why places like Oregon were getting worse. So it's like, okay, well, now let's stop doing what's making us do better. It's like you're rewarding them for good behavior, but it doesn't really work that way with a pandemic, especially a highly contagious one. Yeah, that whole mentality is kind of maddening to me. That seems to be kind of like almost an element of human psychology, though, where it's like we get impatient and we can be a little short-sighted, and we're like, well, hey, we're doing good now, so we can go back to normal. It's like, well, maybe it doesn't quite work that way. Maybe we need to kind of look more long-term. Yeah, I don't know personally that the Delta transmission is because of the lifting of the mask mandates. But it's certainly, the timing of it is, I mean, that's definitely seems like a reasonable conclusion to draw, for sure. Let's see. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Let's see. So I'll touch on just really briefly the differences in terms of my job, and then if no other questions come up, I'll probably kick it off here. So basically, in Oakland, I was working operationally. I was moving between the staging, they called it, which was escorting people from the BART to the the actual entrance of the check-in. It was kind of a long If you've ever seen like a map of the area, it's kind of a long-ish walk. So just escorting them. And the second spot was greeting them at the check-in, checking their temperature, making sure they had an appointment, checking IDs, and then we had check-in stations, and then they'd walk in, and then we had observation in the vaccine tent itself. So we would be letting people in, but also watching the vaccines, making sure that everything was going well. And we did actually have, so it's actually, that reminds me, there was a big reaction that happened in the tent. That was more rare because it's tended to happen more after the shot, and it would be after we removed them into the other tent that they would have a reaction. But there was one time where a person had a pretty big reaction. I wasn't there when it happened. I was coming on from break, so someone was covering me, and then I came in. And when I came in, it had already happened. But the guy was like out on the floor, and it was a long time. It was the longest of any time that I'd seen someone pass out. And they actually just stopped all operations. We just stopped letting anybody in the tent until we got this sorted out. They actually set up curtains for privacy. And I mean, I was worried. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even know who it was. I assumed it was an old person. I assumed it was like, I was picturing like a little old lady with a walker or something having some kind of reaction. And it ended up being like 20 something, like young, early 20s dude who looked like he probably was on some kind of drugs. And anyway, he ended up getting up and was able to walk out. But it worried me because I didn't know who it was. I didn't know the details. I just knew that he was down for seemed like a really long time. You know, typically when people faint, it's pretty quick to come back to consciousness. So yeah, there was the vaccine tent. Then we would have somebody walking them over to observation, and then observation itself. And in all those spots, wherever you are, you're basically trying to just keep people at ease, and call for help if needed. I think that on a personal, it was a really cool experience because, it's like I mentioned before about the whole data thing. There's like data and there's statistics, and then there's just people. And it was pretty cool, like seeing the people that are represented by those statistics and acting with them. And especially at the beginning, the very beginning, because we were still in tier 1. So the people it was only 65 and up, or people who were immunocompromised in some way. So it was either older people, or if there were younger people, they had something else going on. So there were a lot of like special needs kid. I don't when I say kids, I don't mean like kids, but younger. In teenagers or early 20s. If there were people that young, then they typically had something else going on, and a lot of it was special needs and just people that were immunocompromised in some way. And those people tended to be, there was a lot of emotions there. And that was interesting to me because at the beginning, I was still kind of getting used to everything. And, on a personal level, like I've never really been particularly worried about COVID on a personal level, because my family and I we've been pretty good from the beginning about, we have a little bubble that we stay with, interact with people just in that bubble. And we've been really good about the whole mask and social distancing, and none of us have gotten sick ever in this whole time. So I've never really personally been very worried about it. It's more worried about it in society, So being in Oakland, I got to see more of that personal impact. And it dawned on me at one point, I was like, there's there's probably people that have lost somebody close to them to COVID that have come through here, and maybe that contributed to it also. But it was definitely like eye opening. Some of the people that responded the way they did. Some people were really emotional, and they were, some of them would say like, I'm feeling like this is a step back to normalcy. And then some people just saying like, it's been a really long time and I've been waiting for this moment. And, so that was one of the positives of that whole experience, was for all the people that had anxieties or had like a reaction, or just people who in general just didn't want to get the shot. For all those people, there was an equal amount of people who were just overwhelmed with the whole situation. And like I told a story a couple episodes back about the guy who had lost his dad. Like that one really stuck with me for some reason. It was interesting because it had nothing to do with, well, actually, I don't know. I mean, maybe he lost his dad from COVID. I don't know. I didn't, like, we didn't talk about how his dad died. So that's possible, which obviously would contribute to, I'm sure, like how you would feel about getting the shot. But when he sat down, I could tell that there was something like kind of off, something. And I had asked him a second time how he was doing, and then he kind of went into the story. And it was interesting because it was like, this was after a very long period of, going on almost a year now of not acting with strangers because of that whole bubble thing. And this conversation with this guy that I felt like he needed to tell his story a little bit. And it was just cool, like being able to be that person. And then I won't obviously I won't say anything personal about people, but I did meet a couple like celebrity type people. So that was kind of neat too. Yeah, so that was kind of cool. So anyway, I'm going to take one more sip here of my Jack Skellington coffee, and hopefully I answered the questions okay. I definitely was feeling the it's a little bit early for me, but I wanted to see how this would go. So I appreciate everybody for being here. And please, let me know if you have thoughts on like this time worked really well, or this time would be better. Cause I pretty much just do this as okay. All right, I think I'm still alive here. So, all right, I said that I had my phone ready if I needed to. All right, so yeah, I got unstable connection there, but at least I got to the end. So, uh, looks like everybody's still here. Um, all right. Anyway, so I'm gonna let it go there. Um, but yeah, let me know if you have any thoughts on the. I like the person's name Glitch, because now that feels sort of apropos here. since we're having technical issues. But anyway, I will catch you all again. I hope that everybody has a great day, and don't be afraid to question the consensus.